This afternoon, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Smith, candidate for Senate District 26, representing Aiken, Calhoun, Lexington, and Saluda counties. So Mr. Smith, thank you for joining this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Patrick, and please, it's just Chris.
All right, that's very good. I can do that. Well, Chris, let me start off with letting our members get to know about you. So if you would, tell me a little bit about your professional and personal backgrounds and how that shapes your views on education.
Well, I grew up in Atlanta, moved over here in 1985 with Piedmont Airlines, and in 1985, I remember reading about the schools here in South Carolina. They're number 5 or 6 from the bottom. And I remember back in those days making a comment one day that, I can fix education in 2 words. They said, "How's that?" I said, "Parental involvement." Until the parents get involved in the educational process, nothing changes. If you look at the top tier students in the state and actually in the nation, the one thing they all have in common is that they have parents that are involved in the educational process. They're checking their homework. They're making sure their kids are ready when they enter the classroom every day, and they don't have discipline problems. So I'm retired from American Airlines now. Piedmont became U.S. Air, became American, and I'm a residential builder and realtor now. I was a state director in the mid-90s for a ministry called Promise Keepers, Christ-centered ministry for men, and brought Tony Evans in here many times back in 96 and 7, mostly to deal with racial reconciliation. And then 98, I was the event manager for the Promise Keeper Conference at Williams-Brice Stadium. 2000, Easter Sunrise 2000 at the stadium. The last 12 years, I've been the regional coordinator for the National Day of Prayer. So among everything that I do, education is something I've always kind of kept my eye on because, and I made this statement a couple of maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that the answer to poverty just entered kindergarten. If we can get them through high school and get them graduated and have a career in mind when they graduate and give them the tools necessary to be successful in life, then we have succeeded. I was at a meeting with Steve Benjamin about 5 years ago. And I said, "Steve, what keeps you up at night?" He said, "Chris, it's the kids." He said, "Kids don't know how to succeed, nor do they know how to fail. It's learned behavior. And we get to choose what they learn." So, I've got a heart for this.
Yeah, well, and what you just talked about there at the end with making sure that if we can get kids through high school with a career in mind, that'll set them up for success. That's a lot of the heartbeat behind the educational reform package that Speaker Lucas and leadership in the Senate have pushed in the last 2 years. That reform package has not cleared both chambers, so it's likely to come up again in the coming session. So if elected, in your minds, what are kind of the keys to educational reform in South Carolina? You alluded to one with career readiness, but what do you see as the steps that have to be taken to move us out of that 5 or 6 from the bottom that you referenced from the top?
Well, the only people in the whole educational equation that nobody's listening to are the teachers. And I scratch my head in amazement going, they're the ones that are going to tell us how to fix this. And nobody's listening to them. I'm a problem solver. I don't treat symptoms, I solve problems. And we have been throwing billions of dollars at education since 1985 and probably before then, but that's when I really started keeping up with it. And as a matter of fact, who I'm running against entered that office in 1976, and he is billed as a champion of education. And in 44 years, we are still right where we were. So whatever he's doing isn't working. It's time that somebody took another look at this thing. And who I want to talk to are the teachers. What do you want? What do you need? Because y'all are the ones that are going to tell us how to fix this. And nobody's asking you and nobody's listening to you. As a matter of fact, 10,000 teachers converged on that State House a year and a half ago. And only one person was listening, Mike Fanning. And I scratched my head going, what in the world are y'all thinking? And when he got on the Senate floor to advocate for the teachers, it was blocked by my competitor. And I'm going, help me understand. We got to take a different look at this thing. And our kids aren't prepared. Now, two things that I would love to see happen in at least the high school realm before you're able to graduate is that there needs to be a civics class that teaches our Constitution, and there needs to be a personal finance course. And so that our kids are ready when they exit high school, they can balance a checkbook, they can figure an interest rate. It kills me when I talk to somebody and that's my car out there, and that's really how much your payments, $500 a month. Would you just finance this thing for 6 months or no, 5 years? Have you got any idea what your interest rate is? Well, no. And this is what's wrong, and why people aren't succeeding today is that they don't have the knowledge they need in order to be successful.
Sure. And as a government teacher, I love the civics push, and personal finance was in S419. So hopefully that comes up again.
Yes.
And you mentioned listening to teachers, which obviously is going to resonate with our 15,000 members. But part of the problem at the moment is that our state is also losing teachers at really high numbers. We're losing thousands of teachers a year. And so as an elected member of the General Assembly, in addition to listening to teachers currently, what do you see as the essential steps to help our state better recruit and retain those teachers?
Well, number one is going to be better pay. Y'all haven't had a raise in what, 6, 8 years, 10 years? And we're not paying our teachers what they should be paid. Number two is going to be class size. Let's reduce the class sizes somewhat that enable our teachers to have more one-on-one interaction with the students. Number three is going to be better work conditions. Or when I say that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that teachers should not have to spend personal money on classroom supplies. So y'all ought to have a stipend that you're able to use to go buy the stuff that's needed in your classroom. And, I also want to say this. I've always looked at a school teacher, a police officer, a pastor for that matter. It's a calling, not a job. And the most successful teachers view it that way. It's not a job, it's a calling. And you do it because you care about those kids. And so, we need to do a better job, I guess, of recruiting our teachers, but at the same time, retaining them. We're going to have to pay them comparable to what they could make in other states. And of course, the benefit package that's offered in it. And then, get the classroom experience from a teacher's standpoint needs to be positive, where we're reinforcing and backing up our teachers in the classroom.
Well, the seat you're running for in the Senate is kind of unique because while a bulk of your district's Lexington County, you've got 4 different counties that you're representing. And that's a unique position in part because the General Assembly has an obligation under our state constitution to schools across the state to provide a free public education. But we know, and our state Supreme Court has said that throughout our state's history, we haven't achieved universal and equitable access to education for all kids. That is varied by zip code.
Yep.
So as a member of the General Assembly, what do you see as the keys to ensuring that our state reaches the goal of ensuring that every kid gets an excellent education regardless of where they're living in South Carolina?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is statewide funding, which means that every district dips out of the same bucket with the same size spoon. Right now, if you try to compare, two examples. Number one would be Swansea High School versus River Bluff. And I was talking to the head football coach down there several months ago, and he was showing me his facilities and going, you know, Chris, we can't compete against a River Bluff or a Lexington, or I mean, our facilities don't match theirs. I know we're talking athletics now, but moving that into the classroom experience is the same problem, in that they don't have the resources in Swansea that they have in Lexington. And so we need to level that playing field so that all students have the same opportunity in the classroom and the access to the same quality education.
Okay. And related to that, Governor McMaster has spoken a great deal to wanting to achieve that goal. And one way that he's proposed doing that is through private school scholarship programs. He had a Safe Grants program that he announced this summer out of federal relief dollars. And while the state Supreme Court struck that down, the governor has said that in the coming legislative session, he'd like to see the General Assembly establish something similar to his Safe Grants on a permanent basis out of recurring state dollars. So if that ask comes to you as a member of the Senate, what is your position on that topic?
I think that the money ought to follow the kid. I'm all for public education. I want public education successful. But right now you are seeing an exit, a mass exit, I think, out of the public school system and into private schools and charter schools. A lot of it has to do with the curriculum. And a lot of it has to do with the church. You know, I don't want my kids being subjected to some of the things that they're being subjected to in the public school system. And so they move them either into the homeschool environment or into the private school environment. And I think that we need to get back to the core of teaching facts. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that if you try to change or remove history, you're going to repeat it. And we need to study history and learn from history, learn from our mistakes, so that we don't go back to that place, and then build from it. You know, like I say, a lot of this is something that, you know, I'm seeing now, and I think it's because we don't understand who the people were that founded this country, where they came from, why did they leave England to come here? And what was their thought process? What were they trying to protect us from when they wrote that Constitution? And, you know, we have a misconception. That Constitution is there to protect us from the government. It's not there to protect the government from us. That government works for the people.
We actually have been talking about limited government in my U.S. government class the last few weeks. So
well, I'm all for it.
So we've covered a lot of ground on education, but I want to make sure that our members get to know about your deepest held priorities. So is there anything we haven't covered that you would want to make sure that a group of educators know before they cast their ballots this fall?
Absolutely. You know, when I look at education in South Carolina, our top, 20, 25, maybe 30% of our students can compete nationally. It's the bottom tier that drags us down. And that's where nobody's paying any attention. And there are some programs that are out there that could be duplicated in the schools around the state that actually work. One of them being the Nehemiah Project. It is at Airport High School. It was started by a guy named Scooter Scott. And if you want more detailed information on this, I'll be happy to provide it. Scooter died, Jeff Jones took it over, but they hold this in the cafeteria at Airport High School, and it was designed and aimed at risk and at-need kids. And they come into this program and they help them with their homework. They deal with social issues and different things, but they deal with discipline too. Throughout the day, if you didn't get gold stars in all of your classes, you get to mop the cafeteria floor. Now, there's people that might not think that's a good idea, but that's teaching discipline and responsibility, personal responsibility for your actions. He fed them a snack. Jeff Jones is actually taking it to another level, because after all that's done, what he's doing is turning them all into entrepreneurs. They started making soap and hand sanitizer and different things, but then they had to figure out what goes into making those things. And then they had to figure out how to order it. And then they had to order it. And then they had to make it and produce it. And then they had to sell it. And then they had to keep the books on, did I make a profit or not? And so, he's learning a profit loss thing. And they're all learning different, although they're all involved in the whole process. Some of them are better at the manufacturing part. Some of them are better at the bookkeeping part. Some of them are better at the procurement part. And so they're all involved in different areas of the manufacturing, and some of them are better at selling. And so he's teaching this entrepreneurial thing to them. But 3 years into this program, the school board went to Airport High School and said, can you explain this? Explain what? He said, your graduation rate's climbing, your dropout rate is falling, and your grade point average is going up. And the only explanation he had was what Scooter was doing. And so they went over and, these are duplicatable things that we can do to help those kids that are most likely to fail.
Well, I think that those kids are well positioned if they're making hand sanitizer in the year 2020. Lord knows there's a market for that right now.
Well, and they started doing it, at the beginning of the pandemic. But
sure.
So he's teaching them as well, supply and demand. What's in demand right now, and let's manufacture.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, we appreciate the time this afternoon and sharing your thoughts and your positions with our members. And we thank you especially for your willingness to serve South Carolina by running for office. And we wish you all the best this fall.
Well, I appreciate it. And one more quick little thought here is that our school boards have got to be held accountable in this whole thing. I think that they are kind of running amok right now, and they need to be dialed back in and held accountable for what they're doing. Because they spend, I think the schools in South Carolina probably spend more money than any other entity in South Carolina. And they're responsible for those dollars and where they go. And it's time that we held them accountable. But in closing, I really do want to share my appreciation and admiration for our school teachers here in South Carolina. I know many of them. I go to church with a bunch of them. And, and y'all are dealing with some very difficult circumstances right now. And so my heart goes out to you.
Well, appreciate it. I'm sure by teachers across the state. And again, thank you for your willingness to serve.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be listening to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good afternoon.
I hope you do too, Patrick. It's great meeting you.
You too.